faithful film fanatic. Today I have a wonderful guest, Ken. How do you say your last name? Viselman,
Viselman works. Yeah.
producer, director, writer, and so with all those things, I'm curious. What was your initial impression of the film I See You?
Hi. Thanks for having me. By the by, um, I really the movie really fascinated me because there were a lot of movies that were made 20 years ago that felt more real or more possible. I watched the movie and then I went back to watch it a second time because my first review of the movie was just horrible. I really I understood why the movie didn't work at the box office. Then I went back to look at it a second time, and I think the script was probably quite a good script. It was exciting. There was a lot of action. It was they tried to make the weather basically a character in the movie, and so I tried to give them some props for that. But ultimately, I think the movie begins and fails with Jim Gillespie's direction. It There were too many things that were just absurd that could never really happen in real life. And I think part of what makes action thrillers exciting, even sci-fi, is that it's possible. And there was so much that happened in that movie that just wasn't possible. That just made the movie lack credibility.
Um, like, what were some examples you felt like that was just way out there that was unrealistic?
There's a moment in time towards the end of the movie, and I just it really stood out for me. But there could have been 20 different moments I could pick out right now. There's another moment. Stallone is in the air shaft vents, crawling through the vent. There's no way that vent would have supported his weight. He would have fallen out. It would never have happened in real life, But the moment that really I found just absurd was he gets stabbed with this giant blade. It goes right through his arm, and yet he's still fighting with both arms, no problem. And at a point, the bad guy does something so heinous that Stallone picks the guy up over his head and throws him onto tractor blades. And there's just no way that would be humanly possible, right? The sheer agony that he would have been in, the number of arteries, that it just the blood should have been pouring out of the guy, and it just basically nothing happens. There are moments when there are characters that are out in this freezing, frigid, cold weather that if you were exposed to the elements for more than I don't even know how long. I'm not a meteorologist, but 2 minutes, you'd be frozen. You'd be dead. And there are people that are there for who knows how long they were standing out in the cold. It just there was so much about it that was absurd. Forgetting about the choice of bad guys and so for that on the absurdity level, it wasn't. I found it almost unwatchable. Yet I watched it twice this week.
Right. Other than it being observed, did you feel like the characters were written kind of well?
No, I think that the way that they were written and the way they were realized are not the same thing, if that makes sense. So I think that on paper there were some very clear characters, some very clear ideas for to have different personalities. I really had a lot of hope for the movie when it first opened because the opening of the movie was it was almost charming. Stallone was almost charming, and I liked I appreciated that. There was a moment in the bar at the beginning, and I felt the camaraderie. I really understood the setup of who the character was and what the loss was he was going to experience if something were to happen to the woman that he loved. So I really got that. But then the rest, it just started to unravel, and the performances the performances were so bad that if I had paid for that movie in the movie theater, I would have asked to be given my money back. That's really how I felt.
Right. I actually thought, or the actors that played Hank, Jack, Sylvester Stallone, his character Jake, his friend Agent Hendricks, and then Slater. I thought that they were written well.
Yeah, yeah. Did you think they were performed well? Did you appreciate their performances?
I liked Sylvester Stallone's
Yeah.
performance. I
Okay.
don't. I guess no one's performance was like Oscar winning or amazing, but I mean, I was able to feel like I was on this journey with them in a sense, even though
Okay.
it was kind of absurd.
Okay, so let's agree. I think Charles Dutton did his job, right? I
Right?
believe that he was a good partner. I believe that he cared about Stallone. I'm willing to buy their relationship with each other. Until the end of the movie, Dutton gets shot, right? And nobody goes to see if he's okay. And then suddenly, he gets up and he comes back in and they have a little joke and as though, kind of nothing happened. Duggan was out in the cold for how long did that fight scene happen when Duggan was shot and just laying in the ground? You know, uh, it didn't feel that didn't feel realistic. But I do agree with you. Their relationship, I appreciate. I believed, right? I think that the guy that plays Slater, um, he needed to be creepier than he was. I'm sure he was written quite creepy in a script. Like if I read it as a book, I would probably go for this book. Do you know what I mean? I'd have
Yeah.
a different reaction to it. But I think the way a movie is directed and the way a movie is edited can so significantly impact the outcome of the film. But I think that all the problems that exist in this movie exist in the direction and not in the. You can't blame the performance, you know, because the director is the one that's directing what he's looking for a performance. But I think Jeffrey Wright's one of the most talented actors in the world, and yet that performance was. I thought it was preposterous. For lack of another word, I almost wanted to fast forward every time he came on the screen. That's how uncomfortable it was making me. You know, but again, I agree with you. I think that the way that they were realized was quite good as far as in the way they were written. I just think there was something wrong with the direction of this movie.
So, as a director yourself, how would you have directed it differently?
I am always interested in making sure that we're telling the story. And my mentors, people that I've worked with in the past, have always really pushed me to make sure that what I put on a screen is real. That that you could believe it. You know, so I think that the idea of showing that. So here's the premise: we don't want to know who the bad guy is, so we're trapped in a place that we can't escape from, and we know one of the people is a bad guy. So it's a good premise. I'm sold, right? It's like any horror movie setup, basically. So I'm in. I'm totally in. But then what needed to happen is I needed to the characters to not be like cardboard cutouts. I needed them to be dimensionalized people, and I think that that's where the film really fails. Is that the characters are all very one dimensional, and that's just not the way human beings are. I don't think that movie would be directed the same way today as it was 20 years ago.
They probably would. It would have been a lot better if it was under a different director, because the writer of this film also wrote The Guardian, and The Guardian's a really good movie. And
Yeah,
so I think the writer has talent, just maybe this director just wasn't the right choice.
that's what I think. I think that what the director did well was he focused, like you said, the relationship between Stallone and his girlfriend, the relationship between Stallone and Dutton, like the relationship between Stallone and the guy that gets killed at the beginning of the film. The police officer that little quarrely bit. They did that all worked because they were just kind of little vignettes. But as the character needed to develop, right? In the story, each one of those characters, we should have seen how they handle fear or anger or different emotions differently. I don't know about you, but if I were trapped in some kind of a silo and there was a serial killer there, you know, I I'm sure that I would have a whole run of emotions, and trust would not be something that I would readily give to people. It just I don't really think he spent enough time understanding the motivations of these people. You know,
Right.
uh, and I think if he spent more time on their character development, which is probably in the script and just not on the screen. I don't really like dissing other people's work, but I was so shocked by this movie that I'm like vomiting out all kinds of horrible things. So I hope Jim Gillespie doesn't listen to this, or I don't really want to make any enemies in town. Just looking something up right now because I had looked this up earlier. I know that he directed "I Know What You Did Last Summer," which I quite liked that movie. You know, um,
you
and
keep
it was a success.
So we both agreed that the writer's a talented writer, just wasn't directed very well.
Gillespie, yeah,
Gillespie,
yeah,
he made it very unrealistic in certain ways. Like he did a good job with the beginning, but then after the beginning, it just didn't really stay consistent. Like it wasn't believable. It was just so observed, and the movie went too fast to really catch any development or anything to feel like you're with these characters.
right, right. So let's back up for one sec, okay? So
Okay.
Jim Gillespie had a runaway success with the movie "I Know What You Did Last Summer," right? So he
Right.
had a runaway success. It was a relatively low budget film, 17 million bucks, and it grossed. I'm looking it up right now. It grosses 126 million dollars plus all the money that it made, and it's lived in infamy. Now there's a TV series based on that movie, right? So, he does a movie about a group of kids that do something wrong, and the bad guy comes and gets them, right? So if you look at it, this movie, I See You, he's a natural choice for that uh, to be this director, right? He's had a runaway success. Hollywood likes to reward runaway successes. Let's find that young, great, up and coming new director and let him direct a Stallone film. The guy's in it's not going to get any bigger than that in 20 years ago. Okay, fantastic. And now he's in a movie that I really don't think he really fully realized the potential of this film because honestly, like I said to you earlier, when you asked me to review this film, I'd never heard of it before. And I'm like, how could there be a Stallone movie I'd never heard of and never saw, right? So I'm a big Stallone fan. Whether he's a good actor or not, I always find his movies entertaining or, I like the action, whatever. And so I watched the movie thinking, oh, there's going to be a gem here that Terry discovered that I just didn't know about. And I'm like, this ain't a gem. This is a crap ass movie. Why am I watching this movie? So I literally, knowing it was bad, like you see something, you go, oh, this smells terrible. Hey, smell this. That's how I felt. That's how I felt. And I said, there's no way. There has to be something redeeming about this film. Why would this up and coming director agree to direct it? Why would Stallone and why would all these up and coming actors agree to do it? There has to be something. So now I went back to watch the movie a second time, and I want to watch it not as an audience, right? Because as an audience, I understand why this movie fails. Okay. But now as a person who makes stuff in Hollywood or in the entertainment space, I wanted to understand why did all these people sign on, you know? And I think it starts with the script. I think that the guy that wrote this script wrote a really good script with strong characters and a strong idea about people being isolated with a serial killer and how they got and they're all police officers and it's police officers that should have greater skill sets, and should be able to fight off a serial killer, and they're being taken down one by one. So I'm like, you know what? I see why Stallone signed up for that, right? I see why the director signed on when Stallone signed on, whichever one signed on first. I could see how that happens, and I could see how all the other actors fell in behind him. Right? Great, I got that. The movie opens. Stallone is more charming than he usually is in anything I've ever seen him do, and I'm like, okay, Gillespie's gonna pull something out of these characters that I haven't seen before, and I got excited about that. And Stallone is written more dimensional than he normally is in a movie. It's not a Rambo movie. This is a dude with a range of emotions, and then it basically falls apart. The once they get to the place of isolation where this should be the exciting, oh my gosh, there's a serial killer, it all just got more and more absurd to me. And to the point where it's building on its level of absurdity. There's a moment when the serial killer has it's coming to an end. We now know who it is, and he has one of the last people he kills. He gets the police officer to do a series of things that no police officer would ever do. He doesn't even attempt to fight the guy, and I'm like, that would just never happen, But there were so many of those it would just never happen moments that even me trying to find a way to like the movie, this would never happen moments just they stack up so many times that I can't dig myself out from underneath it. So if I had to say something great, really good about the movie, I think the script was probably a really good script.
The movie reminded me, like, even though there were a lot of absurdity moments in the movie,
Yeah.
I felt like I sympathize for Jake Malloy, the police officer,
Okay.
and the stuff that he went through, and him losing his wife, and the stuff he's seen being a police officer. And
Yeah.
then whenever they go to the hospital and you're around all these group of people, and this can't remember what the character's name was, but he's just telling you the story of these preschoolers getting killed, and just people
Yeah.
telling different horror stories. And
Yeah.
I I I felt so sympathetic, I guess, because it made me think about, like, police officers and how bad people treat them and what they
Yeah.
go through that we don't know about. And so
Yeah.
in that sense, I appreciated the movie for that, I guess.
Well, I see it, and again, I mean, it's there, it's in the script. You know, we we should have felt. I'm a really really empathetic moviegoer. Okay, so if I'm the guy you want in your movie. If you do something that's supposed to be funny, I'm the guy that laughs, I'm the guy that cries. Horror movies, my friends won't go with me anymore because I literally scream. I like jump out of my seat in horror movies. Like, I'm the guy you want in your movie. In this movie, when that guy's telling that story about these kids and the fingers, I should have been crying. Like, I would normally be crying in that movie. And I saw it twice, and I didn't even have a reaction to it. I just it was there, and I agree with you completely that what's interesting about this movie, watching it in 2022 versus watching it in 1982 or 2000 or whatever, is that we had a different reaction towards police officers, or most of us did back then. So it should have been wildly shocking to hear these stories, these confessions from these police officers of the gruesomeness that they've been dealing with and how it's impacted them, right? But in 2022, after what we've been experiencing the last couple of years with all this defund the police and all this kind of anxiety and frustration and fear and anger and all these emotions that we have around police officers, that movie should have been even more important to me now. I should have been even more empathetic to these police officers And in fact, I just really thought a bunch of people were just saying a bunch of words. Like I didn't really buy into it. I did experience Sylvester Stallone's grief. I felt really, really upset for him, you know, with his grief. But I'll give you an example. There's a moment when Stallone's fiance has been murdered gruesomely, just horribly gruesome. And I give the director great credit. Gillespie, he gets huge credit for how gruesome those murders were. Like you get props for that. Okay, because it really shows us how freaking scary this and dangerous this serial killer is. So big props for that. Now there's a moment where Stallone is in a house that has nothing in it, right? And he's I don't know what happened to all his furniture, but he's in the room, unbelievably depressed, and he slits his wrist, right? This is a moment in this movie for us to really understand his agony, right? And really, and it's not there. Now, did the editor cut it out? Did Stallone, was there more to that performance? And between the director and the editor, they removed it. But there was a real moment for us to really, really be empathetic, really get into what's happening for Stallone and how he's handling it. And we just cut from that scene immediately to him and his partner driving up to this place in the middle of nowhere, right? And I think there were moments like that that just got cut out of this film for some choice that was made, but it really took away from us being able to really care about, be afraid for, for the characters that were there. And I suspect that it was in the script and somehow it didn't end up on the screen. That's just a hunch I have. And the lady comes on to say, recording in progress.
Welcome to Faithful Film Fanatic again. Today I have guests on Kenn Viselman,
Yep.
who's a director, writer, producer, and is involved in a lot of children's shows like Teletubbies and Thomas and the Friends. Before we get into the movie, I was fascinated with what you were telling me earlier about how you got into this space.
Terry, first, thanks for having me on. Something I'll tell you that most people in my life know is that I always wanted to be a movie critic. Like that's what I thought I was going to do with my life, right? I love going to the movies, and I've always been quite passionate about it, right? So I never really planned to be a director or write or anything to do. And I just thought I would be a critic, right? Because they say those who can't teach, So I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm good at complaining. I could probably do this. I didn't really expect my life to take the turn that it did. And I told you this, but I was working in the garment industry, and I'd been quite successful at helping to, I worked in the buying offices of a department store in New York, and then I started working for clothing manufacturers. And I ended up working for a couple really fascinating, totally interesting companies. But I really felt that the industry itself was kind of super just sleazy, and it just really wasn't. I didn't want to spend my day fighting, basically, because people fight with you for like 50 cents off the pair of pants so you can make the margins you need to make, and I just really didn't want that to be my whole life, but I quite liked what I was doing. One day, a friend of mine kind of set me up on a blind interview date, and I went to talk to the people who were making Thomas the Tank Engine. I didn't know what it was at the time. I knew that Ringo Starr was in a kids show. I had seen it by accident one day, and then stumbled into this place where now suddenly I'm talking to the people that made that TV show. And I thought to myself, entertainment industry could be fun. It could be lucrative. It certainly won't be as sleazy as the garment industry. And then found myself in a way where the garment industry is a lot more straightforward. Like we manipulate women, men into thinking they need to buy this thing. That's one thing. But now what I found is that when you talk to producers of kid shows, when I do, because a lot of them, if they want to work with me, I always ask them, what's your reason for doing this? And they'll be like, oh, I want to make the world a better place for kids. But everyone always says it, but it's never true. Maybe one in 1,000 people really do want to make the world a better place for kids. Most of them just think like, wow, Barney was stupid and I made a lot of money. I can make a lot of money too. I have an idea that's just as stupid as that is. And then you find that it's really just people that want to try to manipulate the parents of young kids to get them to buy stuff. And I'm like, oh, who would have thought the garment industry would have been, less corrupt or less whatever word you want to use than the kids' entertainment space is. So I didn't intend to do it, but I then, for a series of reasons, probably too long, too kind of far away from what we came to talk about, I could tell you how I ended up becoming an advocate for kids and really saying, look, I don't have any problem making a lot of money. I just think that we should be at least providing something of value. We should be trying to create a better place for kids and making a lot of money at the same time. I don't think those two things need to be mutually exclusive. I focus on my partnerships. I focus on the storytelling. I focus on the quality of the work and know that if you focus on that the monies will come. If you focus on the monies, then you end up telling crap stories and you don't really produce anything that has long-termness to it. I was super excited. I just sent you, I told you about an article that just broke just 5 minutes, even while we were in here dealing with audio stuff, that three of the, more than three of the shows that I worked with that were British based are now, have proven to be the three of the top 10 British kids shows of all time, as far as the impact that they've made on kids and their lives going forward. And for me, that's the greatest reward I've ever gotten, is to know that the work that I do lives on and is meaningful and has helped change people's lives in a positive way.
That's awesome.
So, I didn't mean to do a soliloquy there. Sorry about that.
It's all right. But yeah, I didn't really know how corrupted the kid space was until I started doing a lot of research on it. And it's like so sad how like I was reading all these things about Nickelodeon, Disney, a lot of messed up stuff about Dan Snyder, the who for a while was the head of Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
And it's just so sad and sickening that there's people out there preying on children like that.
It's a difficult world that we live in right now, and that it's part of why I continue to do the work that I do. It's why I've stayed in the kid space as long as I've stayed here, because I really didn't plan this to be my life's journey, but we had an epidemic a few years back with childhood obesity, and I thought to myself, why isn't anybody doing anything about childhood obesity? Why aren't we making shows that are more active viewing instead of passive viewing, to get kids to get up instead of just sitting on the couch? And I took that to a real extreme with a project called The Oogie Loves and the Big Balloon Adventure, where I wanted to try to take the movie-going experience for young kids and make it more natural for them and have them be able to interact with the images on the screen. So we created a whole thing where it was patent pending for quite a while. I should check and see if we ever got the patents, about how we told kids when to get up, when to sit down, and created dance moves and things for them to do while they were watching a movie in the theater, with the intention of taking that active viewing experience and creating TV shows like it. And I knew it was a risk, and I knew that it could, tank my career even. But I felt very strongly that this was something that we needed to do. The Teletubbies, the same kind of thing, that we did research to find that 92% of all parents in America, for sure, and across the globe, were giving their kids at least an hour of television a day from the time they were 6 months old. But there were no television shows that were aged appropriate for kids to be watching. So kids were watching shows that were for older kids. And then by the time they got older, they aged out of those shows. So they weren't benefiting from them. So again, I took a massive risk when we, developed the Teletubbies, when I brought them to America, because I knew that there'd be backlash. But I also knew that parents should decide what they want to give their kids. So if a parent decides, I want to give my kids television, I want to make sure that I'm giving parents at least a healthy choice. You could give your kids whatever you want, and if you want to give them sweet snacks, fine, but they should be able to have fruit available to them too, so the parent can decide which snack they want to give their kids. And that's how I felt about the Teletubbies, is that I agreed to mortgage my house to make sure that there were monies to make that show, because I felt that strongly that this show needed to be made, you know? And I've taken those kind of risks many times in my career, but I always have kids and their well-being as my North Star, you know? And now that's expanded into family stuff. And we're just getting ready to launch a new series right now that is a series about climate change. And I'll just, without belaboring this, I'll just tell you a quick little thing. And in fact, nobody knows this, I haven't told anybody this, that there was a study done at the end of last year where they took 10,000 kids from 10 different countries across the globe and asked them a series of questions. And what they found was that 45% of these 10,000 kids from across the globe, right, which was a pretty big sample, 45% of them suffered high to extreme climate anxiety, that the world would not be here as they know it by the time that they're adults, right? And so it's quite an extraordinary thing. And yet we believe in the entertainment industry, oh, we have to entertain kids. We can't actually educate them, you know? And I believe that storytelling can change children's lives, that we can make children believe that just because you're watching a superhero doesn't mean that you're not a hero yourself and that you don't have the power to change the world. And that message resonates so strongly for me right now when we're dealing with masks and COVID issues and hate and bigotry and just all this stuff, that I don't think that there's a message that we could give a child that's more important than that. And it's my new crusade. It's what's going to drive me now through the however long my career lasts.
That's amazing. And that's silly that so many people in the industry have that mindset. Because I remember as a kid watching Mythbusters and Magic School Bus, which were both very educational.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we understand education, but we think that it's going to be boring. You know, kids aren't going to watch it. If they don't watch it, I won't be able to sell my toy. You know, so I don't subscribe to that. Right. I think that humor and the series that I'm working on now, we really use levity. It's very real and very, very serious subject matter, but we tell it to kids on a level that they can understand. They appreciate it. You know, the series has already sold in within a year. It's now airing on over 140 countries in 20 different languages across the globe. You know, because there's just this demand for it, and yet we're so myopic we are in all industry, really, especially in the entertainment industry. We just keep recreating, new sequels and prequels and origin stories, and we're not willing to look at what's going on in the world right now and serve that need. We just look at our bottom line and say, hey, I know what you did last summer was a big hit. Why don't we redo it? Why don't we reimagine it for today? Instead of, why don't we look at today and try to create content that serves that audience in this moment? And I think every time we rise up to create content for the moment, the audience appreciates it and they support it.
Yep. And it's crazy how focus everyone is about what makes the most money, and like you said, always making sequels to everything.
Yeah, yeah. And we're always surprised when the sequels don't work. You know, it's always it's fascinating to me. Sometimes we do have a hit. The nostalgia factor is pretty awesome. Like, where are they now? What are they doing? What do they look like? So I get it, but that might get them to tune on or tune in. But like, look at this the sequel, whatever you want to call it, to Sex in the City, right? And just like that, and people are now criticizing it because it isn't Sex in the City. Sex in the City was, women with healthy sex lives in their 30s, and now they're in their 50s and they're all in some other place. So instead of just trying to just here they are, you wanted to see where your friends are and what they're doing, and just kind of accepting it, that audience is going, no, we want what we want more of what it was instead of what it is, and that's the risk that you take, is that you come in with preconceived expectations, and then they're not met because it isn't what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I that was my problem with the whole iCarly reboot. Like how
Yeah,
they were advertising that it was going to be for the same audience that grew up watching iCarly, but it was so stupid and it didn't feel like the same show I grew
right.
up watching.
I totally get it. I watched a tremendous amount of television. Um, I love the medium. I love storytelling in general. So I'm always fascinated to see how the ebb and flow between movie actors that are doing television actors that are doing movies. What kind of stories are we telling? How far are we willing to push uh, the limit? You know, and it's utterly fascinating to me how this industry is just constantly changing. A movie actor would never have done television 15 years ago. It was beneath them, and now you've got huge movie stars doing TV. So it's fascinating to me how that shift.
Do you think that like 10 years from now, people aren't going to watch movies anymore? Because like the there's in new movies, there's not really that much passion in them anymore, and they're sloppy. And here you have these TV shows that are massive, and you
Yeah,
care about it because you're more in the world, you're more invested in it. It's more character driven than these movies. There's none of that.
they've been projecting the death of the movie industry for as long as the movie industry started. You know, um, I I love going to the movies. I'm a bit more hesitant going to the movies in the middle of a COVID situation, but
Right.
I love going to the movies, and I love the experience. Again, not in COVID, but I usually love being in opening night at a movie in a packed theater and feeling all the emotions of all the people. I told you, I'm the guy. If there's a horror movie, I am literally the guy that jumps out and screams, and my scream will get everybody else in the theater will start to scream. Like I love that sense of community, that experience, right? Which you don't get when you're watching a movie alone at home or with a friend or whatever. So I hope we never see the end of that experience. But I do think that writers, there's so much more competition now, especially with streaming services stepping up, because you have to pay for that. If you're going to pay an extra whatever it is, $14.99 to have your Netflix subscription or your Disney Plus or your Paramount Plus or your HBO Max or Apple, whatever it is, there's just endless number of them. They have to put huge money into trying to get you to come on over, and then they have to keep you there. So it's one thing to sign up for a month because you want to check out Succession, but
Right.
then you better HBO Max better offer you something else, or you're going to cancel your subscription. So I think what you're going to see is more competition. You're going to see shorter windows in the movie theater. So a movie might get 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then it's going to go to, to the streamer as a new channel. Like, I think that COVID has created that. But look at the phenomenal success of Spider-Man, right? This latest Spider-Man, it's the most successful movie that Sony's ever made in America, So, people are clamoring to get back into the box office. The Scream, whatever it's called, Scream 5 had a really big opening as well. And so maybe what we're going to find is that the types of movies that we see in the theater is going to be different. Maybe we're going to see more movies that appeal to families and appeal to, an 18 to 35-year-old audience, or 40, 45-year-old audience. And then we're going to see those other movies, playing on streaming services and not in theaters. That I could see that reality happening, unless it's driven by a huge star or a huge piece of IP or something, So I do think that will happen. And, the industry is in a constant state of evolution, The only thing that changes more than the movie industry is Bloomingdale's on 59th Street, and a New Yorker would understand that, because Bloomingdale's 59th Street is constantly under renovation. There's always construction going on in that store. And I think that's how I'm looking at the entertainment industry. It's that COVID has just created so many obstacles. But one of the brilliant things that's come out of it is that people are starting to look at animation to tell stories, and that we don't have to have animation simply be a 30-minute or an 11-minute kids show, that we can tell, gritty, real stories or funny stories using animation as the vehicle, because it's pandemic proof, So I think that's an interesting thing. And I have the most extraordinary graphic novel series that we're now just starting to pitch as an hour-long, gritty, animated series for families, that takes place in the 1930s. It's a Black mercenary gun for hire who, the juxtaposition of his life when he's in Europe doing work, where he's a king amongst men, and then comes home to his apartment, to his brownstone on the Upper West Side of New York, where he's not up to drink out of a water faucet, in public. It's the way that he's treated and the invisibility that he experiences parallels a lot of what life for an African American in America is today. And it's quite a brilliant piece of work, and I'm super excited to bring that. And we wouldn't have been able to do this, pre-pandemic, where I could tell this story using a gaming engine and really graphic animation, to tell this guy's story, and then have the ability to blow everything the fuck up, excuse my French, because it's animation. Like, that's the problem with doing a period piece, is that you have to blow stuff up, and you can't do it in real life, but you can in animation.
Right. And I think animation is getting more popular, because I think that animated Spider-Man movie that came out not that long ago did a lot better than some of the Spider-Man movies ever did.
Exactly right.
So, as a writer, director, producer, since you know so much about the industry, and you for a while wanted to be a movie critic and you've studied film, what your first impression of I See You, what were your thoughts?
Well, I told you before we got on that I was really surprised. So first off, I had never heard of this movie, which I thought was fascinating. And I was quite confused about it because the movie had two titles. And I was trying to understand, why does it have two titles? Are we talking about the same movie? And then I thought, maybe I'm watching the wrong movie altogether, because I could not understand the choice of all the movies that we could be talking about, why this one? And so I was quite fascinated about that. And so I watched it the first time through and was like, I don't know, this Terry Roy, he needs medication. There's why. And I found the movie so preposterous and to the point where I was getting annoyed watching it. And I'm a huge fan of Jeffrey Wright. So I was excited to see Jeffrey Wright in this movie. And then I was so appalled by his performance that if I didn't know Jeffrey Wright, I would not watch anything Jeffrey Wright was ever in because of just how god awful that performance was. So we had a scheduling glitch, and I was like, hey, I should watch this movie again to make sure that it's fresh in my mind. So I watched it the second time, not as an audience person, right? But I watched the movie as a I don't know, I was going to say a filmmaker, but I don't want to overstate who I am in the world. But as somebody who, as somebody who sees movies differently, like somebody who's worked in this industry for a long time. So when I watched it this time, I first said, okay, let's get the script. Let's understand what is the script. And I think there's probably a very good script underneath this film. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I think the idea, and I understand why they picked Jim Gillespie. He directed I Know What You Did Last Summer. It was a massive hit. He was a young up and coming director. And they're like, hey, get that guy. It's exactly what Hollywood does. So they had a script. I Know What You Did Last Summer. A bunch of kids do something bad. Serial killer comes after them and they're kind of isolated and he takes them down one at a time. Stallone's movie, somebody does something bad. He's isolated with a bunch of other people, and there's a serial killer there who takes them down one by one. It's a natural thing that Gillespie should have been brilliant at this. He's not. The movie begins and ends with him. And, I think there are some moments, there's some performances that are interesting, but some of the movie is just so absurd that it's not absurd enough to laugh at it, but it's absurd enough to say, why am I still sitting in this movie theater? Well, I'll give you examples if you will. So I think one of the things that Gillespie was trying to do, which is something that Michael Mann does quite often in his movies, is Michael Mann makes an inanimate thing a character, meaning he'll, in a movie, Los Angeles could be a character in his movie, just the way that he films it and his love for the city. He could do the same thing with the city of New York as an example. And I think what Gillespie does is in this script, in this movie, Gillespie uses the extreme cold condition as basically as though it was a character itself, something that we have to be afraid of and aware of. And he's a killer in and of itself, or he should be, the weather, what I'm talking about, right? So in the meantime, there are moments that these people are out there in this freezing, crazy, cold, below zero weather. They're not wearing masks. They don't have gloves on. They're just there. There's a dude who's just sitting in the driveway. I don't know if he was there he could have been there for days, and yet he's still alive. He's not. It was kind of ridiculous. Charles Dutton gets shot and is out there in the ground, and he's there for I don't know how long. It seems like 20 minutes. The dude would be dead. He certainly wouldn't be getting up and walking into the room making jokes. Besides being shot, he would have died of hypothermia, right? So there's that kind of level of absurdity. They made the cold killer, a character, a bad guy, and then they're not consistent about the way they use it in the film. So there was that issue. Then there's just a blatant, preposterous moment where the bad guy stabs Stallone with the largest kitchen knife of all time. I don't know, they must have made this prop because this knife is preposterously long. It's like a sword almost. He stabs him through the arm. Stallone should be bleeding. He should be freaking out. And somehow, let's say adrenaline kicks in, so he's still going there. I don't understand why there's no blood, but we'll go with it anyway. And then Stallone fights with the bad guy, basically not realizing that his arm has a knife in it. And then at the big climactic moment, he picks the guy up over his shoulders with both arms, having no problem, and then throws the guy in the air. And I'm like, what just happened? And then Stallone pulls the knife out of his arm and doesn't have any consequences. You know, I've watched enough movies to see where the doctor goes, don't take the knife, you know, don't remove it, you'll bleed to death. Somehow they don't, there's no reality there. And I get it. You have to suspend reality sometimes in a movie.
Right.
This director, Gillespie, asks us to suspend reality way too many times. So for me, it's one fatal flaw of the movie. The second fatal flaw in this movie is that I do accept that Stallone and Dutton have a relationship with each other. I do accept that, and I do believe the relationship that these two guys have with each other. I buy that. I just basically think that every other character in this movie is a cardboard cutout, is a stereotype with one dimension. And I think that if you were trapped in a silo in some kind of institution in the middle of nowhere as a group of police officers, and you all have terrible stories that have happened to you in your life, and you're there, right? I do think that you would have a series of emotions when you discover that there's a serial killer amongst you. And these guys all basically just stick to form to their one character trait, and that's the way they're played throughout the movie. And that has to be Gillespie's fault.
I felt like Jake Malloy, Sylvester Stallone's character, I felt like his character developed
Yeah.
More than the majority of the characters in the movie. And I felt like you were very sympathetic with what he was going through. And so, in that aspect, I thought that that was done in a good job.
I agree with you. And I agree with you that what Gillespie did is Gillespie put all of his effort in making sure that Stallone looked dimensional. Okay. But there's a moment where we should be feeling empathetic for him. We should be feeling his pain. And the moment that he is obviously in the most pain, he slits his wrists and, you know, is going to kill himself. We should be feeling that anguish, and we should have seen what happened when he did that. You know, the camera should have kept rolling, and it may have kept rolling. It may be on the edit floor, which, you know, shame on the editor if it is, but that was a moment for us to really, really feel this guy's pain and his anguish, and to be empathetic and to root for him. And it's not there. Stallone is in a house by himself with no furniture, with no explanation either, you know? And so there are moments that I think simply got edited out of the film. Now, whether that was at the request of Gillespie, the director, or it was the editor's choice, or the studio made choices, I don't know that. But I do think that was a problem for me. And I mentioned to you that I'm the dude that cries in movies. I laugh. I'm the ideal audience member. So if it's on the screen, I will react to it. And there's a moment that you had mentioned when one of the police officers was repeating this horrible, horrible experience that he had. I would normally be crying, especially because it's about young kids. I would be crying loudly. I didn't have a single reaction, and I watched the movie twice in a week and still had no reaction to the guy's experience, which led me to think that it's there, it's on the screen. It's just the performance was so kind of muted, you know, and maybe it was to make Stallone look better. But whatever the reasoning was, the character's performance was muted, and as an audience member, I was robbed of that emotion.
Did you feel like director Jim Gillespie
Gillespie, yeah.
did you feel like he, in a way, was playing a game with you in the movie? Like, because you weren't sure who the bad guys were. You weren't really you weren't really sure about anybody. You weren't sure who was going to die next, and you're kind of paying attention to who was going to get killed off next. So you kind of narrowed down who's responsible, or is it still this person?
I'm not going to give Gillespie credit for that. I'm going to give the writer credit for that.
Okay,
You
yeah,
know, I'm gonna say to you that, whoever it was, I think it was Ron Brinkerhoff, right?
right, right.
So I
Ron,
think he's the guy, right?
yes,
So
sir.
I think that he put it down on paper, but I didn't feel that way. But my honest thing is, I didn't give a screw which person died next,
Right,
because I didn't care about any of them. Courtney Vance is absolutely wasted in this movie. He's got one moment in the movie where he really reacts, with great emotion, and I sat there going, "Where was that emotion in this movie? Like, why isn't everyone having that kind of moment, and why aren't those moments stringing together?" You know, so I think I think that it was there and it was just lost. You know, I think that Gillespie just felt like, and it'd be interesting to know what he felt. But I think that he felt that the circumstances themselves would be enough, that we would be thinking we're playing a game of cat and mouse. You know, I just honestly, it just felt kind of disjointed, and they edited out a lot of the stuff that I needed in order to care about the characters and want to find this killer. And I freaking love serial killer content,
right.
So I'm a big fan of it, but I have a very high expectation when it comes to it, because there have been a lot of serial killer movies and TV shows, and so if you want me to go, and if you want me to pay to see it, then you damn well better make sure that you have played with every emotion I have, because that's part of what makes serial killer stuff so good, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I I thought it was kind of cheesy in like because I was trying to care about the characters and I was trying to care about who gets killed, and I thought it was cheesy in how they picked Slate to be the killer, because as far as the movie goes, it didn't make sense. It didn't seem like that was his character. You
Yeah.
know, I thought it would have been a lot better choice if Hank or Jack was the serial killer, but I was surprised that neither of them were the serial killer.
I'm right there with you. The truth of the matter is, I thought it could have been interesting if Charles Dutton was the serial killer. You know, it's like that kind of betrayal. I would have thought that was more interesting. That it really was someone that you didn't expect, or someone who had it just it didn't feel. I would have even liked it if Courtney Vance was the killer. I just thought the guy they picked, they deliberately kept him in the background so that you wouldn't suspect that it was him, and then suddenly it was him. Like if he had been the guy that was telling the story about the kids that had been in the explosion, and so what we really felt first, we needed to really feel empathetic for the guy and what he went through, right? So
Right.
assuming that was directed properly, and that guy then went on to start killing other police officers, all I would have freaked out if that were the case. That would have been a perfect setup for me. That he was upset because the other police officers let the explosion, whatever it is, that we found out more of the story at the end. that would have worked for me way better than what the choice was that they actually made. It's just kind of like some wimpy, skinny little dude is suddenly overpowering, and there's a moment at the end of the movie where he has a gun and he gets the police officer to get down on his knees and he's going to kill him. And he goes, "Look at me," and he looks over and he just randomly has a noose in his hand now. And it was kind of like, I mean, I literally started laughing when it happened. I was like, what? Where did that come from? Like, how did he learn how to make a noose? And now what's he going to do? This little skinny, scrawny little guy is going to hoist these people up. He hoisted the old man up over his head and threw him onto a chair and then electrocuted him. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that any of that could have happened. So again, I'm sorry, I keep going back to preposterous.
Did you feel when we were in that hospital in the movie, did you feel sympathetic at all for the vulnerability of these cops, or was that not shown well enough, you felt like?
You know, what it felt like to me was a college thesis. Like an art kids in a film school making a movie. That's really what the whole thing felt like. I wanted to feel their tension. I want it's not there. Like I said, this one moment with Courtney Vance, I bought that one moment, where he pulls a knife on Jeffrey Wright, in fact, and I bought that he was on his tether, I did buy that. I didn't buy the other ones. It just felt like they were just yelling at each other. I didn't feel their fear. I didn't feel their distrust. I didn't experience any of it. And like I said, I went back to watch it a second time to just see if it was me. But it was kind of like performances are also your body. It's not just the words that come out of your mouth. And it's not the accents that you use. It's the way that you express yourself. And fear and tension, just the way they would have been looking at each other, the way they would have made sure they had their back against the wall so somebody couldn't come up behind them, their paranoia, all of that should have been happening. We should have been experiencing that. It should have felt like a screw tightening, and we should have felt the fear and the frustration and the anger and all of that should have been rising with each time they were there together in a space, so that they would be checking each other out more and more. They would have come up with some kind of a way to make sure they weren't going to be attacked by somebody. But then what they decide to do is arm each other. Hey, everybody, one of you is a serial killer, but I'm going to give you a gun anyway. I was like, what? It didn't make sense to me. They would have created their own kind of weapon. They would have done something, but they wouldn't have handed guns to everybody knowing that one of them is a serial killer. That just didn't make any sense.
Well, during that scene, if I remember correctly, when they were arming themselves, didn't everybody think that Jake was a serial killer?
Yeah, but Stallone says we don't know that it's Jake, right?
Stallone is Jake.
No, I mean, so yes, everybody thought it was Jake, and then a few minutes later, everybody thinks it's Slater, and then it's like nobody knew who it was,
Right.
And the woman, Polly, right? That's her character, Polly. She, or is Polly the actress's name? In any case, she knows it's not Stallone. She was with him, right? So
right.
that also, when Tom Berenger's character comes in and goes, he was, I had to hide behind the woodshed or whatever, behind the pile of wood, whatever it was. She goes, wait, he wasn't coming out to hurt you. He was coming out to save you. He was coming out to rescue you. Like it was perfunctory to get everybody to think it was Stallone, so that the audience would go, it's not him, it's not him. we don't have that moment. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I didn't have that moment. Yeah, I want to slap Gillespie now. The more I'm talking about this movie,
But like that's why like as when I review movies, I like to try to find like movies I would ordinarily watch. And like a lot of times they are bad. And I guess that's why I would ordinarily watch it. But like I another thing though I think about is I love writing. And I cannot remember who said it. I can't remember if it was John Hughes or someone said it. But the idea is it's better to watch a lot of bad movies than it is to watch good movies because when you watch bad movies, you're going to be asking yourself, well, why did this do wrong? And that's going to teach you what not to do. Whereas if you're watching a good movie, you're going to be so engaged to it that you're not going to really think, well, why was this good?
I think there's some truth to that. I think it's really important to watch a bad movie, and I find something in every movie that I watch, that is somehow helpful to me in telling stories, right? Sometimes I watch a movie to go, how did that movie ever get made, right? And then I really try to figure out how did that movie ever get made? This movie got made. This movie got made because Stallone said he would do it, and because Gillespie was an up-and-coming director, who had had a big success under his belt. So I get how this movie was made. But then I look at it. Sometimes I watch a movie to go, how would I improve it? Or so I'll watch bad movies knowing they're going to be bad for that reason. But I don't think you can underestimate watching a good movie. I just always suggest when you watch a good movie, watch it twice. Okay.
Right.
Watch it the first time as an audience member. Watch it the second time as an aspiring filmmaker. Look at the shots that the guy took. Like, why did this movie work for you? Did it work for you because you felt about the characters? And if it was, why did you feel that way? When I read a Stephen King book, right? Stephen King's books are terrifying, right? They used to be. I don't know if I still say they're terrifying, but Stephen King, like The Stand, for example, is a freaking terrifying book because usually what happens is everything is real except one thing. So all he asks you to do is just accept this one thing in your world. Okay. So he doesn't give you 15 different things that you have to accept. It's just one thing. And The Stand terrified me because it was 100% real, right? Everything about it was real. As long as you believe that this guy could have an extrasensory thing. If he touched you, he could know something about you. So, and then to see inside people's minds, I found it terrifying. But the thing is that I care so much about the characters that I have to see their journey through. I have to see what happens to them. And a Stephen King book would fail if he didn't create and draw those characters so profoundly. And right. So I use that as a parallel because in a movie about a serial killer, right? In this movie with Stallone, we really need to care about him, okay? And we really need to, because there's all these other people, who cares if they, all right, so the guy kills somebody else, who cares, as long as he doesn't kill Stallone, Right. But I think that this movie would be a lot more impactful if if those characters were drawn the way Stephen King would. So when I watch a movie, if I really like it, I'll watch it a second time. I'll look at camera angles. I'll look at conversations that they had. I'll try to look at the color palette, the background. I'll watch Emily in Paris because I want to see what style are they giving her. Like, what is it that's drawing people to it? And clearly, the craziness of what she's going to wear. We haven't seen that since Sarah Jessica Parker in Sex and the City, and we're craving it. Right. So I understand it. I get that. And I that's what I do with things. Like right now, I'm just about to watch Up in the Air. I mean, don't look up. I'm about to watch it a second time because, first of all, I love this movie, but 45% of people watching it hate it. And I'm like, how could you hate this movie? So now I want to watch the movie to see why do people hate it, And so I'm watching a movie. I love to try to look at it from a a point to go, what is this that isn't right, or what's freaking people out? So I do that, but I think watching stuff twice is super helpful.
For sure. Um, did you? So we both agree that this movie had a lot of flaws, and it it had a lot of potential and a lot better than what it was.
Yeah.
But with the writer Ron L. Brittenhoff, did you feel like there was any mystery sense in the movie, or was that so weak because of all the other problems that you didn't really care?
I hate saying I didn't really care, but I didn't really care.
I totally understand.
That's really the truth. I wanted to. I really see. I give him a little bit of a pass. I'm gonna tell you. Okay, so I give him a little bit of a pass here because it could have been in the script, right? It could have been there. It could have been edited out by the editor could have edited. The director could have done stuff that changed what was on the script, but what I have noticed is that none of these people who all came together to make this movie, right, who are all up and coming people in their fields, none of them went to have a big success again afterwards, and I don't know if that's because of this movie or
not. You talking about the writer and director, or talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically the writer and the director,
Well, the writer wrote The Guardian, which was like 4 or 5 years after this, and I imagine The Guardian was successful, right? Because that was a real good movie. At least I liked that movie.
All right. Well, it looks like you've got something new to review, but The Guardian cost $70 million to make, right? Plus, it had all the marketing dollars that go along with it, and it grossed $95 million at the box office. So I don't know if that's a win. It's not a loss, but I think what probably happened was they gave him a second chance because the script was quite good. They gave him a second script, a second movie of his, and it didn't hit it out of the park, So
Yeah.
I suspect that impacted his career later. I don't know that for sure. He may have. Who knows? He might have died. I don't know the guy.
Yeah.
But I suspect that he's a very talented writer who hasn't really been able to show his skill set. That's my hunch.
For sure. Well, one more question about the movie. The music. I know music is very important in a movie because it helps with emotions. Did you feel like the music score was there, or not really?
Well, I was really hoping you didn't ask me this because I didn't really want to pour any more pee on this guy's movie.
All right.
Okay, but I'm going to tell you. So there's music and there's score, right?
Right.
So I don't think that the score was used as effectively as it could have, but it didn't. It wasn't alarming to me. I will tell you, the final theme, the song that closed out the movie, I don't know if you paid attention to it, but I want you to go back and listen to that song again. It is absolutely. Now remember, this is a big new director. It's a big Sylvester Stallone movie. They've got $55 million. because it was basically shot in one place, whatever. Okay, some abandoned whatever. That song is the worst song I have ever heard in a movie ever. It absolutely, that's the thing that stood out for me the absolute most. And I didn't want to sound like a petty jackass, but that, and so I wasn't going to say anything. But that song, when I heard it the first time, I'm like, what is that? Just to add insult to injury to a terrible movie, I now am listening to the worst song ever. And so when I watched it the second time, I insisted, I forced myself to watch that song and listen to that song all the way through to see if something happened. Yeah, that song in and of itself should open the film. And so people should say, if you don't like this song, don't watch this movie. It's the same sensibility to me.
You ever seen Last Christmas Last Christmas with Emilia Clarke?
Yeah.
I honestly thought that song in the ending credits was way worse than this song.
Oh no. No, sorry.
That song
sorry.
was
I'm sorry. Glitter is still the worst movie I've ever seen. Okay. And that song is the worst song I ever heard in a movie. Yeah. And I think it's going to stay that way. I can't imagine, unless my mother decides to sing the closing song of a film, I'm pretty sure that I See You has a lock on that. Yeah. You know what? I want to know who sang that song, because I'm curious to see what happened to their career after that song.
Yeah. Let me look that up for you. I put I See You and it's taking me to Avatar.
Yeah, that's what exactly.
It won't take me to the actual movie. Let's see here.
I'm telling you, nobody wants to admit it. That is genius. That it absolutely doesn't. Oh, hold on. I got it. Somebody did ask, is it called A Man at the Frontier? Is that the name of the song?
I have no idea. I'm on IMDb to see if I can help find it, but I don't see it.
Well. So here's the thing. The one song is called One More Night, and the singer's name is Gib Droll, which I think is very, very funny, right? Then you got Love Is by Kit Han, Freezer Burn by William Ross, and then the last song is Rage Man Blues by Gilby Clarke, who I've never heard of. I'm just checking to see if Gilby Clarke ever did anything else.
Yeah.
I'm assuming because it's the last song on the thing. No, this is a guy. The last song is sung by a woman, isn't it?
I think so, but I'm trying to see if I can find it on YouTube.
Song I've ever heard ever in a movie. They have prosthetics, eyes, and teeth in the, like I said, I don't really want to knock someone else's work. I'm just fascinated.
Right.
I know somebody put a lot of energy into making that song,
For sure. Every part of a movie takes a lot of work. So I totally understand.
So, I mean, I do feel that way, but I do, I was quite surprised. I really was quite surprised.
I'd be really surprised if I ever got the opportunity to meet anybody who had anything to do with this movie. And maybe if I talked to them, I might have a new appreciation of film. Maybe I'd understand something that I didn't understand before.
Yeah, I see that. I agree with that.
Think of when the characters went at each other. What did you think of that? Like when they all went against each other?
So here's the rub, okay? If this was just a group of psychiatric patients in a mental institution, okay, it's a free for all. Who knows what they're going to do, right? This is a group of police officers who have been trained in combat, right? Trained in de-escalating, trained in all of that stuff. Okay, all of who've been pushed to the limit before they even got to the mental institution. Okay, so they're all there doing their thing. That free for all, every interaction with this police with the killer would be different than it would be on the movie I Know What You Did Last Summer. These aren't just a bunch of kids. These are trained police officers, you know, who are already experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, already stressed out beyond belief. They're not going to just get down on their knees, put their hands behind their back, and not try to fight back. They're not gonna. And they're not going to be in a room together, being combative with each other. And the thing that, so the tensions are escalating. And then suddenly the sweet nurse lady says, everybody quit it. And then suddenly everybody just stops and goes, okay, like they're not, that's not the way that would have gone down. There would have been some fist fight that happened, right?
Right.
Stallone this guy keeps coming up to Stallone. You didn't know how to take care of your woman. You didn't know how to deal with your woman. Stallone would have punched that guy. The fact that he walked away from it twice with no explanation as to why he's not, it didn't make any sense to me. It was very deliberate. Clearly, the director was trying to tell us something, that he's calm under pressure, that he doesn't get roused easily, whatever the word is I'm looking for. Like, you can't provoke him. It's not who he is. And then suddenly, I didn't understand what the point of that was. There needed to be more dialogue between Stallone and the guy to go, I'm not going to be baited by you. Any sentence that he would have said would have made us understand what that moment was. But it stuck out twice for me that I'm like, why didn't he punch the guy? Because I promise you, if you said that about someone that I loved who was murdered by a serial killer, you'd be in the hospital now, Right. So, and I'm not a police officer, I'm not a violent guy, and I'm not experiencing post-traumatic, and I didn't try to kill myself, and I'm not, on my last string. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I didn't understand that. That's why I keep saying to you that the problem for me in this film is that I don't really understand what's motivating any of these people. I don't. So each one of these interactions with them, I don't understand why they're behaving the way they do.
What kind of movies do you like to watch? Like, what do you like to watch?
One of the best parts about me is that if you say, hey, do you want to go to the movies? I'm like, yeah, sure, when? Right? So I never ask, what movie do you want to see? Yes, I don't care. I love that experience. So I watch, there are moments when I have seen every movie that's shown in a movie theater, but there's nothing for me to see because I've seen them all. I don't, ironically, tend to watch a lot of animated kids movies. And I find that it's kind of a very peculiar thing about me that I feel like I do it for my living and I don't want to do it for my
enjoyment,
for my life. Every once in a while, there'll be an animated film that I think is too important to not experience. Like right now, I'm Kanto is I'll see Kanto today or tomorrow because I think it's having an impact on audiences, but more than just an impact. It's becoming part of the fabric of life. Something like 4 of their songs are in the top 100 right now, and their album is kicked Adele out of the top spot or something like that. That's fascinating to me when a kids or family film project can do that. So I'll watch that movie for that reason, but I love small independent films. I love big blockbuster action films. I like movies that have old people doing things that old people aren't supposed to do. I say in quotes, you know. I like black comedies. There are very, very few movies that I'm not interested in seeing, you know. And in fact, I'm trying to think of one right now. 'Cause I have a couple dear friends, a gay couple that I call my husbands, and they like really, really stupid movies. So I wouldn't normally go see 22 Jump Street, the reboot, you know. But if they like, if that's something they're into, then I'll go see it with them because their happiness makes me happy. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, but for the most part, I can't think of a movie right now off the top of my head that I'm not interested in seeing. I'm going to see Nightmare Alley tonight. And what's interesting to me, maybe not to you or to anybody listening, but what's interesting to me is how COVID has changed my movie going experience, you know, because normally I will go to a movie opening day, first showing, because I don't want to hear all the noise about the movie until I've seen it, and then I'm fine, talk about as much as you want. But I don't want people to ruin the ending or something like that. So, but what COVID has done is now I wait. I just went to see Spider-Man a couple of days ago. Like I waited till it was in the theaters for 3 or 4 weeks, and now I'll go with two friends of mine who I know are COVID negative, and go with them and make sure we're not near anybody else in the theater. You know, so I'll sit in the middle of the two of them and feel like I'm having my movie going experience. You know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really enjoyed having you on, and I'd like to us do more reviews together in the future.
I'd love it. I'd be super happy because you know this is my secret dream job, right? So I'm super happy to do it. Hopefully you'll find a movie that I don't really not like, so I don't have to watch twice in agony. It's 4 hours of never getting back, you know.
I totally get that.
Yeah. No, I don't care. Pick the worst movie you can find, and the next time I come on here, I will tell you why it was a good movie. Okay?
I honestly, I've been reviewing a lot of bad or in between movies lately just because I like trying to experience something different, something I wouldn't ordinarily watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say that you ever heard of the movie Snake Island?
Snake Island?
Yeah.
No, I never heard of Snake Island.
I promise you that movie, and then there's a movie that some guy wanted me to do with him called Rubber, and I promise you that both those movies are way worse than this movie.
Well, you know, here's the thing, right? You picked a movie with a big cast. At least it was a big cast 20 years ago that failed. And so I think it's fascinating. Why did a big movie with a big cast and a big director fail? Right?
Yeah.
So for that reason, I thought it was a very clever choice as a movie to review. A movie that stars William Katt, that has William Katt on his shoulders, is most likely not going to be any award-winning film.
Right.
But I want to just check and see if this is the name of this movie right now. So yeah, Olivia Colman is in a movie right now called The Lost Daughter on Netflix. Right, and it's a lot of people are talking about this film, and I know that that's not what we're on here to talk about. But I'll tell you what I think is fascinating about this film. It was directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, an actress, right? A very accomplished, very intelligent, very talented actress.
Mm-hmm.
And it stars Olivia Colman and what's her name? Dakota Johnson. Okay. Now, I've never thought of Dakota Johnson as a particularly good actress. My fault. Right? I'm wrong here. And what Maggie Gyllenhaal does brilliantly in this movie is she gets great performances out of these characters. And she's got Ed Harris. It's a real cast, and they do an incredible job. The thing is, I think she tells a really bad story, meaning she put all of her energy into getting the performances, and I don't think that the story she's telling is being told well. And so it becomes a fascinating thing because people watching this movie, it's been nominated and winning awards like mad crazy. It's been nominated for like 90 awards. It's won 20 something. It's very popular. But I walked away saying I really hated this movie. I loved the performances and hated the movie. And I think that's a super weird experience. So it'd be interesting for me, whether it's on tape or just a conversation, it'd be interesting for you to watch that movie and see if you have the same reaction to it that I did.
Okay, sure. I'll check it out sometime. And it's called The Lost Daughter.
The Lost Daughter on Netflix.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out.
Okay. All right. I have to jump in a couple of minutes. If there's anything else you need, I have to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. Whatever you need.
I think that we covered everything. I very much appreciated your time, and I love talking to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's been now that we're on the other side of this, I'll tell you something funny. I don't listen to podcasts. I've never listened to a podcast before, so I think it's super funny that I quite like doing this, but again, I'm not sure I'm going to run out to listen to a podcast anytime soon, except this one maybe because I'm on it,
Right.
I mean, but I do, it was fun, and I do appreciate you letting me come on and do it with you.
No problem. I've been trying to get as many episodes pre-recorded as possible because you never know what's going to happen, and I'm trying to stay consistent. So I'm not exactly sure when this episode will be uploaded, but I promise I'll let you know.
Cool. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Have fun, and thank you so much. I'm very grateful.
No problem. You have a great day.
You too. Bye now.
Bye.